In just 3 explosive minutes, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett tore through Donald Trump's defense over the Epstein scandal. Live inside a Capitol hearing room watched by 83 million Americans. The air turned icy, faces drained of color. Tapers trembled in nervous hands, and when she branded him a dealer of depravity, even his fiercest loyalists froze in their seats. What truth could be so lethal that the most powerful man in America was left speechless? Stay with us. This is a story worth every second of your time. The halls of Congress were not made for silence, yet at dawn they held it like a secret. The marble floors, cold under the dim amber glow of emergency lights, reflected the ghost of the night before. Every step Jasmine Crockett took echoed in the emptiness, the sound bouncing off the vaulted ceilings as if the walls themselves were whispering warnings. There was a faint smell of old paper and polished wood, the scent of history and power layered with something else, tension, metallic in the air, like the charge before a storm. Somewhere deep in the building, a vent rattled, and a lone bulb flickered, its light stuttering as if uncertain it wanted to illuminate what was about to happen. Jasmine adjusted her pace as she entered the underground tunnel leading to the hearing chamber. The fluorescent lights above buzzed faintly, casting strips of cold white over the concrete walls. Her shadow stretched long, distorted, like a silhouette walking ahead of her toward the battlefield. She kept her chin high, but her mind was anything but still. Flashes of the Epstein-Maxwell-Trump timeline flickered in her head, dates like wounds. July 6th, the DOJ memo naming over 1,000 victims. July 18th, the motion to unseal grand jury exhibits. August 1st, Maxwell moved to a minimum security prison she should never have been eligible for. August 8th, Trump's DOJ pushing again for selective unsealing, steering the narrative like a captain in a storm steering away from the truth. She could almost hear the clock ticking down to when she would lay these facts bare. A voice rose in her memory, her father's voice, deep, steady, and unshakable. One day, you'll have to stand up for what's right, even if the room is against you. He'd said it once when she was a teenager, sitting on the porch in the Texas heat, after she had come home from school furious about a teacher who had ignored a friend's complaint. Back then, she didn't know how heavy those words would feel, and the room was not a classroom, but a chamber filled with cameras, lawmakers, and a man whose name could make headlines in every corner of the planet. She could feel the weight of eyes that were not yet upon her but soon would be. Millions, maybe tens of millions. They would watch her every word, every pause, every tilt of her head. Somewhere outside, a protest was already building. The faint hum of voices carried through the stone like distant thunder. She knew there would be signs with survivors' faces, chants demanding justice, and others shouting in defense of Trump. She knew that beyond the chamber doors lay not just a hearing, but a battlefield where words would cut deeper than steel. Her hand brushed against the folder she carried, its edges worn from the number of times she had flipped through it in the last 48 hours. Inside was evidence that could shatter a defense, the kind of truth that didn't just wound, it exposed. And she wondered, not for the first time, if exposing it would make her a hero or a target. What happens when the truth becomes more dangerous than the lie? The scene shifts, like a camera cutting from the dim halls of Congress to a fevered America, holding its breath. Across every major network, anchors speak in urgent tones, voices layered over flashing banners. Historic hearing today, Crockett versus Trump. Split screens fill the airwaves. On the left, the steps of Capitol Hill crawling with survivors' advocates, holding faded photographs of young faces whose lives were stolen. On the right, a red sea of MAGA hats chanting in unison, their voices sharp enough to pierce the humid August air. Heat clings to the pavement, and the smell of grilled hot dogs and fried dough mixes with the acrid scent of sweat and exhaust fumes. Sirens wail somewhere beyond the barricades, a reminder that tension has a pulse, and it's racing. A helicopter hums low overhead, its shadow slicing across the crowd like a blade. News cameras swing between clusters of people. A woman gripping a handmade sign that reads "Justice for the Forgotten." A man in a Trump 2024 shirt yelling into a megaphone. To college students live streaming the chaos 2000s online. On Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, comments blur past in a relentless scroll. Finally someone will put him in his place, witch hunt, expose everything. We already know the truth. Each post is a spark, and the country feels like dry grass waiting for a match. In one newsroom, The atmosphere is a different kind of charged. Danks of monitors display every angle, every crowd shot, every frame of the hearing room where the confrontation will unfold. A producer leans over the control desk, voice barely above a whisper, but somehow heavy enough to make the room still. This will be the one they remember. No one answers. They all know what's coming. This isn't just another political fight. It's a collision course between truth and the machinery built to bury it. Somewhere, the clock is still ticking toward the moment when Jasmine Crockett will step into frame and force Donald Trump to face what he's spent years avoiding. And when that moment comes, the question won't be whether America is watching. It will be whether it's ready for what it's about to see. The double doors to the hearing chamber swing open, and the still air inside is instantly shattered by a staccato storm of camera shutters. Flashes burst like lightning, ricocheting off the polished tables and sterile white walls, turning the space into a war zone of light. Jasmine Crockett steps forward, the echo of her heels striking marble in perfect, deliberate rhythm. Her dark suit absorbs the glare, but her eyes, steady, locked, cut through the chaos and find him. Donald Trump sits already in place at the witness table, leaning back slightly, smirk curling at the corner of his mouth. The dark blue of his suit swallows the shadows. The crimson of his tie burns against the whitewashed sterility of the room, like a drop of blood on snow. His gaze meets hers and holds, no flinch, no blink. Just the kind of eye contact that feels less like a greeting and more like the first shot fired. In the second row to her right, Representative Ayanna Pressley watches quietly, her presence like a steady drumbeat beneath the nose, a silent anchor for the storm ahead. On the opposite side, Mark Bennett, the Republican strategist with the silver hair and Fox's grin, leans toward a staffer and whispers something that pulls the faintest laugh from the corner of Trump's mouth. The kind of man who doesn't come to hear the truth, but to twist it before it can reach daylight. Jasmine doesn't look away from Trump, but she catches them both in her periphery, cataloging, remembering, storing every micro-expression like evidence in her case. The chamber is full, but the air feels tight, the oxygen thinned by anticipation. Staffers shuffle papers, the faint rustle amplified by the tension pressing down on everyone's chest. Reporters posed in the press section don't just watch, they lean forward, ready to dissect every syllable, every breath, every tremor that might slip past the carefully built armor of both opponents. Outside, beyond the thick walls, the roar of protest still swells, but in here, sound has taken on a different quality, sharper, closer, like the crackle before a lightning strike. Jasmine reaches her seat. She doesn't speak, not yet. Instead, she places her folder on the table, sliding it forward just far enough for Trump to see the edge of the documents inside. A subtle message: I'm not here to spar, I'm here to expose. For a fraction of a second, the smirk falters, so quickly it might have been imagined, but she sees it. And in that tiny break, she knows this room is a battlefield where even the smallest crack can shatter the illusion of power. The gavel hasn't even struck, and yet the war has already begun. The question now isn't whether Jasmine can bring the truth into this chamber. It's whether the truth can survive the crushing weight of the power arrayed against it, or whether it will be suffocated before it ever leaves her lips. The gavel cracks once, echoing through the chamber like a starting gun. Jasmine Crockett wastes no time. Her voice slices through the air with the precision of a scalpel. Mr. Trump, she begins, leaning forward just enough for the microphones to catch the sharpened edge of her tone. You are a man who hides behind power to shield predators. Her words hang there, heavy, acidic, and for a fraction of a second, the entire room forgets to breathe. Across the table, Trump lets out a short, dismissive chuckle, the kind meant to signal confidence, but it lands like a hollow echo in the thick silence. He shakes his head slowly, lips curling into a smile that doesn't reach his eyes. This, he says, drawing out the word, is just another political witch hunt. The phrase feels rehearsed, a lifeline he's thrown himself countless times before, but this time the water is deeper, darker. Jasmine doesn't flinch. Her gaze is locked, unblinking, a hunter who's just found the trail, a witch hunt. Tell that to the women who were silenced while you dined with their abuser. Tell it to the victims whose files your administration buried under excuses. Murmurs ripple through the gallery, a low, restless sound like wine moving through dry leaves. The chairman's gavel hovers, it doesn't fall. Everyone knows this is the moment the country tuned in for. Then, as if on cue, the The lights flicker. It's quick, barely a second, but enough to shift the air. The camera nearest to Trump zooms in, catching the twitch of his jaw, the rhythmic tapping of his knuckles against the polished desk. Tap, 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 a sound too soft to register for the casual listener, but for those watching closely, it's the sound of calculation. He glances sideways at Mark Bennett, who leans back, face unreadable, before returning his eyes to Jasmine. She lets the silence stretch, lets the tension cold tighter. "You've spent your career mastering the art of evasion, Mr. Trump," she says finally, her voice low but carrying, "but evasion is not a defense. It's an admission that you have something to hide." The words are precise, surgical, and they land exactly where she intends, in the space between his practiced bravado and the reality he doesn't want shown. The room is no longer just watching a hearing, it's watching a siege. Outside, chests pound against the Capitol walls, but in here, the only battle that matters is the one taking place in the inches between them. And as Trump leans forward, narrowing his eyes, the question pressing on every mind isn't whether Jasmine can land another blow. It's whether she's about to rip open something so deep, so raw, that even he can't control what comes spilling out. Jasmine doesn't raise her voice, but the authority in her tone is enough to still every rustle of paper in the chamber. "We will now hear the testimony of Virginia Giuffre," she says, each syllable deliberate, her eyes never leaving Trump's. She presses a button on the console, and a grainy video fills the large screens on either side of the room. The image flickers before stabilizing, revealing Virginia seated in a plain chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her voice, when it comes through the speakers, is unpolished, trembling, but unflinchingly clear. The room changes instantly. Conversations die mid-sentence. The air conditioning hums cold against the skin, but the temperature feels like it has dropped even further. The faint, rhythmic spin of old ceiling fans above blends with the sound of her breathing, heavy, uneven, picked up raw through the microphone. She speaks of nights she can't erase, of names whispered like threats, of doors locked from the outside. She doesn't mention Trump directly. She doesn't need to. The room feels the weight of implication in every pause, every quiver in her tone. The scent of strong coffee drifts in from somewhere at the back, incongruous with the heaviness settling over the room, like a reminder that outside these walls life carries on, oblivious to the truths being laid bare here. Trump's expression doesn't change at first. His smirk is gone now, replaced by a thin, flat line. The camera catches the tightening of his jaw, the barely perceptible flare of his nostrils. "Don't let them see you sweat," he tells himself, silently. He leans back in his chair, pretending to adjust his cufflink, but his fingers twitch once before stilling. His gaze shifts for the briefest moment toward Mark Bennett, who offers nothing. No reassuring nod, no signal, just a fixed stare on the screen, as if even he knows this moment can't be spun away. In the gallery, one of the survivors grips the hand of the person next to her so tightly her knuckles turn white. Ayanna Pressley sits forward in her chair, eyes locked on Virginia's image, her face a portrait of resolve. Reporters scribble furiously, the scratching of pens barely audible over Virginia's words. "We were told no one would believe us. That powerful men could make us disappear." The final sentence lands with the precision of a blade, and the silence afterward is unbearable. Jasmine lets the quiet linger. She doesn't rush to speak, doesn't cut the moment short. Instead, she leans toward the microphone, her voice calm but carrying a weight that feels heavier than the air itself. "Mr. Trump," she says, eyes fixed on him, "tell this room, tell her, that this is just a witch hunt." The question isn't really a question, it's a dare. And in the seconds that follow, as every eye turns to him, the only thing more deafening than the silence is the knowledge that whatever he says next could either save him or end him. Jasmine doesn't ease into it. She strikes like she's been waiting her whole life for this moment. From the folder in front of her, she slides out a set of papers so thick the edges are frayed from overuse. To DOJ timeline, every date underlined in red, every meeting marked like a crime scene. She lays them on the desk one by one, the sound of paper hitting wood sharp enough to make heads turn in the gallery. Cameras zoom in, catching the black ink details. July 6th, DOJ memo identifies over 1,000 victims. -118th. Motion to unseal grand jury exhibits. July 25th. Deputy Ag meets privately with Ghislaine Maxwell. August 1st. Maxwell transferred to minimum security facility. August 8th. Request to unseal select materials. The pattern is unmistakable, the gaps impossible to ignore. Her eyes never leave Trump as she speaks. These aren't coincidences, Mr. Trump. These are choices. Choices made under your watch, by your people, to protect someone who should have faced the full weight of justice. She lifts the final page, holding it just high enough for the press cameras to catch the red-circled date, then sets it down slowly, deliberately. Her voice lowers, steady but cutting like a scalpel. Mr. Trump, you are depravity wrapped in a suit. The reaction is instantaneous. Gasps erupt from the gallery, reporters, pens pause mid-stroke, and a ripple of murmur surges across the room like a wave hitting shore. Some lean forward as if they might miss the next breath, others glance at Trump, waiting for the counterpunch, but he doesn't move. His smirk is gone, his jaw set like stone, eyes locked on Jasmine with a heat that would burn if she cared to notice. The sound of the ceiling fans, suddenly louder, mixing with the faint click of camera shutters firing in rapid bursts. Mark Bennett shifts in his seat, leaning toward Trump, whispering something low, but Trump doesn't answer. Ayanna Pressley watches from across the chamber, her expression calm, but her hands clasped so tightly together her knuckles blanch. Detention is a living thing now, cold in every corner of the room, waiting to snap. Jasmine doesn't back down. She lets the silence stretch until it's almost unbearable. Then, with her hands resting lightly on the folder, she says, "So tell us, Mr. Trump, was it incompetence or was it protection? And if it was protection, who else were you shielding?" Her words land like a hammer, breaking the last pretense of civility. The room isn't breathing anymore. Even the air feels heavier, thick with the sense that something irreversible has just happened. And as the cameras roll and the world watches, one question rises above the nose, sharp and unrelenting. Is this just the first crack in the wall, or the beginning of its collapse? Trump leans forward, elbows pressing into the polished wood, his voice rising before the chairman can even re-establish order. This, he jabs a finger toward Jasmine, is what happens when angry politicians come here to grandstand instead of telling the American people the truth. The word angry drips with condescension, calculated to diminish, to reduce her to a caricature rather than a force. His volume swells, filling the chamber, his cadence growing faster, trying to smother her with sound. She's not interested in justice, she's here for the cameras, for her 15 minutes, for the headlines tomorrow. That's all this is, a performance. The crowd in the gallery shifts, some murmuring in agreement, others bristling at the attack. The air feels tighter, warmer, the hum of the ceiling fans now drowned by his voice. His hands slice the air with each accusation, punctuating the space between them with invisible blades. His eyes sweep over the reporters as if recruiting them to his side, daring them to turn this into his victory instead of hers. But the cameras have already found her. The lens zooms in, closing the distance until only her hands fill the frame, steady, unmoving, gripping the edge of the desk with quiet force. Fingertips press into the wood, knuckles pale but not trembling. She doesn't interrupt, she doesn't blink. She lets him expend himself, the way a seasoned fighter lets an opponent swing wide, until the weight of their own fury starts to slow them down. Trump notices, his voice grows sharper, harsher, as if raising the decibels could make up for the lack of precision. This is the problem with Washington. People like her, always playing the race card, the victim card, the whatever card, anything to avoid the facts. And the fact is, there is no case. The words hit the air like thrown stones, but the lack of impact in her expression only fuels his irritation. Mark Bennett leans in again, whispering something, perhaps telling him to rein it in, but Trump waves him off without looking. The chair beneath him creaks as he shifts forward, looming over the microphone, as if his physical presence could crowd her out. And then, the moment that says more than any insult, Jasmine finally moves, but not to speak. She straightens, releases her grip on the desk, and folds her hands neatly in front of her, the posture of someone entirely unfazed. Her gaze lifts, meeting his with the calm of a soldier who has already chosen the hill to stand on. The camera catches the faintest curve at the corner of her mouth, not a smile, but the shadow of one, as if she's just marked the exact second he overplayed his hand. The room senses it, a shift in the current, subtle but undeniable. He's still talking, still reaching for dominance, but the question settling over the chamber is no longer about his accusations. It's whether he realizes that the more he swings, the closer he comes to punching himself into a corner he can't escape. Jasmine waits for Trump's voice to finally burn itself out, then leans forward, sliding a new stack of papers into the center of the desk with slow, deliberate precision. The microphones catch the faint rasp of paper on wood, a sound that slices through the charged air like a blade. "Mr. Trump," she says evenly, "since you're so committed to facts, let's talk about these." She lifts the top page. The DOJ letterhead glints under the overhead lights, and angles it just enough for the cameras to catch the seal. "These," she continues, "are internal Justice Department memos. Not leaks, not rumors, official communications. And they tell a very different story about Ghislaine Maxwell's transfer to a minimum security prison." Trump's head tilts slightly, but the smirk doesn't return. In the gallery, a murmur starts low, rising just enough for the chairman to glance toward the crowd. Jasmine doesn't break eye contact with Trump as she reads aloud. Subject: Special considerations in inmate relocation. Per executive level directive. Her voice hardens. "Executive level, Mr. Trump. That means someone at the very top signed off, and that someone worked for you." The room reacts instantly. Gasps ripple through the air, reporters' pens freeze mid-word, and cameras swing like predators catching scent of prey. She flips to the next page, the rustle of paper unnaturally loud in the silence that follows. Rationale: avoid high-security placement to maintain potential cooperative engagement. Her gaze narrows. In plain English, she was given special treatment sex offenders are not supposed to receive, to ensure she was comfortable enough to talk, and yet, she hasn't said a word. She lets that hang for a beat. Unless, of course, she talked to the right people. The silence now is heavy enough to feel, pressing against skin and bone. The only sound is the faint flutter of the next page in Jasmine's hands. The paper trembles, not from her grip, but from the air vents above, the low hiss of cold air cutting through the heat of the moment. Even Mark Bennett shifts uneasily in his chair, the confidence in his eyes dimming just enough for the camera to catch it. Trump leans back, crossing his arms, but his jaw works in small, tense motions. He's calculating, measuring the distance between what he can deny and what the paper in her hand can prove. Jasmine watches him, her expression unreadable, but her voice carries the edge of a scalpel about to cut deeper. "You've called this a witch hunt," she says softly, "but this," she taps the memo with one finger, "this is a breadcrumb trail straight to your desk." The chamber holds still, as if movement might break the spell of the moment. Outside, the distant chants of protesters thrum like a heartbeat. Inside, it's only her voice and the weight of the evidence. And as the cameras drink in every detail, the question is no longer whether Maxwell's transfer was political, it's whether the man sitting across from her is about to find that trail leading straight back to him. Jasmine lowers the last memo onto the desk, her hand lingering on it for a moment before she shifts her gaze back to Trump. Her voice drops into a register that forces the room to lean in, each word deliberate, heavy, impossible to mishear. "You didn't just fail the victims, you betrayed them." The sentence lands like a clean strike to the ribs, the kind that steals breath before the pain sets in. A ripple moves through the gallery. Some gasp, some mutter under their breath, and others simply stare, wide-eyed, at the man across from her. Trump's posture changes almost imperceptibly, but the cameras catch it. His shoulders draw inward just a fraction, the shift of a man feeling the space around him close. The lighting, unforgiving under the chamber's sterile fluorescence, catches the bead of sweat forming at his temple. He shifts in his chair, adjusting his suit jacket as if the fabric itself had turned hostile. His hands rest on the desk, but one thumb begins to trace slow, deliberate circles against the polished wood. A tell not many notice, but Jasmine does. She doesn't rush to fill the silence, the tension stretches taut, a rope ready to snap, and every person in the room can feel it. Those survivors, she continues, her voice low but cutting, sat through years of silence, of being told their pain was inconvenient, of watching the people who should have been held accountable walk free. And under your watch, Mr. Trump, the system didn't just look away. It protected the predator and punished the prey. The words hang there, not as an accusation, but as an indictment carved into stone. Mark Bennett leans toward Trump again, whispering something urgent now, his lips tight and his eyes darting toward the press gallery. Trump nods once but doesn't speak. his jaw working side to side like a man trying to chew through steel. The bead of sweat trickles down to his cheek, but he doesn't lift a hand to wipe it away. To do so would be to acknowledge it. In the gallery, one of the survivors looks down at the floor, her hand gripping the strap of her bag until her knuckles whiten. Another stares straight at Trump, unblinking, as though daring him to deny what everyone in the room now feels pressing in. That this moment is no longer about politics, or parties, or spin. It's about what he will do when there is no maneuver left, no shadow to hide in. Jasmine leans back slightly, her eyes locked on his, not with triumph but with the grim certainty of someone who has seen this kind of corner before. And as the cameras zoom in, catching every twitch, every breath, the question that hums through the chamber like an electric current is no longer if he's cornered. It's what he will do when the corner has no way out. Jasmine doesn't turn to her notes this time. Her voice softens, but the kind of soft that makes people listen harder. "Mr. Trump," she begins, "before I stood in this chamber, I stood in a courtroom with a girl who couldn't even look me in the eye." Her gaze sweeps the room, not in search of approval, but to make sure every word lands. She was 15. She had been hurt in ways I won't describe here, not because I want to spare you, but because she deserved better than to have her pain turned into a spectacle. The quiet in the room deepens, the weight of her words pushing against the walls. I remember her hands, how they shook when she had to point to the man who had done it. And I remember the way the air felt, thick, heavy, because everyone in that room knew the truth, but half of them didn't want it spoken out loud. Her eyes returned to Trump. She won that case. But do you know what she told me later? She said the hardest part wasn't what happened to her. The hardest part was sitting there, hearing people in power pretend they didn't believe her, because it was easier than holding someone accountable. Jasmine pauses, letting the silence wrap around the story. Then her tone hardens, the emotion sharpening into steel. When I hear these survivors, women who have been carrying their truth for years, I think about that girl. And I think about you. The words come faster now, riding the edge between fury and control. Every second you stayed silent, another survivor felt abandoned. She leans forward, her hands flat on the desk, the microphones catching the slight tremor of breath that betrays just how deeply this runs. The air in the chamber feels hotter, the hum of the ceiling fans no longer enough to cool the closeness pressing in. People shift in their seats, not because they're restless, but because the atmosphere has become suffocating. Trump's expression is unreadable, but the sheen of perspiration at his temple betrays a discomfort he can't mask. His eyes flick toward the gallery, just for a second, and land on the faces of survivors staring back at him, their gazes steady, unflinching. He looks away almost immediately. Jasmine's voice drops again, quiet but razor-sharp. "This is not about your legacy, it's about theirs. And every time you chose silence, you told them their lives mattered less than your image." The sentence lands like the final beat of a drum in a battle march, and for a moment no one moves, no one breathes. The cameras catch the faintest shake of her head as she sits back, not in defeat, but in refusal to let the weight of this moment be diminished. And in the stillness that follows, the question that presses into every chest is not whether he feels the heat, it's whether he finally understands he's the one who lit the fire. Trump sits back in his chair, the wood creaking faintly under his weight, but his mind is moving faster than the cameras can catch. "She's hitting harder than I expected." The thought comes uninvited, almost like an admission. "I've faced generals, billionaires, prosecutors, but this is different." He feels the words she just delivered still hanging in the air, as if they've settled into the fabric of the room, impossible to shake off. She's not playing for the headline tomorrow, she's playing for something bigger. And the worst part, the people in this room can feel it. He shifts his gaze toward her, calculating. Don't let her see you blink, don't let her see you bleed. But there's an unfamiliar tightness in his chest, not fear exactly, but the weight of someone who knows the terrain has tilted under him. His fingers drum the table once, twice, then stop. If I go at her the wrong way, she turn it on me. If I go soft, she still gut me. There's no safe move here. The camera catches a flicker in his expression, but outside, the scene is boiling over. Protesters crowd against the metal barricades, their signs thrust high, their voices pounding like war drums. Justice now, justice now. The chant rolls in waves, carried on the humid August air, seeping through the stone walls as though the building itself can't keep it out. A helicopter hovers above, blades chopping the air in a relentless rhythm that feels like it's sensing with the pulse in his temples. Trump's gaze drops to the folder in front of Jasmine, the same one she's been pulling knives from all morning. What else is in there? How far is she willing to go? He imagines the headlines if she lands one more hit like the last. He imagines the clips replayed on loop, the soundbite that could follow him into every interview, every rally. She's not like the others I could outlast. She's building something here, a moment. And if she wins it, I can't take it back. He forces himself to look bored, to lean back, to pretend the chants outside are nothing more than distant noise, but his mind is still running the math. Millions are watching. If I strike now, I have to make it count. No flinch, no stumble. And yet, a part of him he doesn't want to acknowledge whispers the truth. This is the first time in a long time I felt cornered by words alone. The camera cuts back to Jasmine, her posture unshaken, her hands resting like she owns the table between them. Outside, the crowd's chant hits another crescendo. Inside, Trump's jaw tightens, his eyes narrowing into slits. He tells himself he's still in control, but the question crawling at the edges of his mind refuses to go away. What if, for the first time, control isn't his to keep? Jasmine doesn't speak right away. She reaches into her folder again, her movement slow, deliberate, as if she's about to place the final piece in a puzzle everyone has been straining to see. The room leans in without realizing it. When she lays the documents on the table, the camera flashes hit like lightning. The top page is stamped in bold, subpoena. She slides it forward so the word is visible to Trump, to the press, to the millions watching at home. These, she begins, her voice measured but edged with steel, are subpoenas issued to compel testimony from key witnesses in the Epstein investigation. Witnesses who could have confirmed critical facts, answered questions survivors have been asking for years. She flips to the next sheet, the names blacked out in public versions, but fully visible here in the chamber. And under your administration, Mr. Trump, these subpoenas were ignored, not lost. Not delayed, ignored. The word lands with a heavy thud, and the gallery reacts, a wave of low gasps and murmurs, the sound like dry branches breaking. The air feels denser now, the overhead lights harsher, throwing hard lines across every face. Trump shifts in his seat, the chair legs scraping faintly against the floor. His hands come together in front of him, fingers interlocked, but the tightness in his jaw betrays the mask he's trying to hold. Jasmine doesn't give him space to recover. Do you know what it means when a government turns its back on subpoenas in a case like this? It means the truth was never the goal. It means the process wasn't stalled. It was strangled. She leans in, her eyes narrowing until they're locked onto his. It means you weren't just silent, Mr. Trump, you were a shield. A shield for monsters. The phrase slices through the room like glass. For a heartbeat, even the ceiling fans seem to still. Some in the gallery look away, others stare straight ahead, as if forcing themselves to witness this unflinching accusation. Cameras flash in rapid bursts, capturing every twitch, every flicker of expression. On the far side of the room, Mark Bennett exhales slowly, his eyes fixed on the table as though willing himself invisible. Jasmine sits back slightly but doesn't break eye contact. Her voice drops, almost quiet, but the microphones carry it with perfect clarity. You can wrap yourself in titles, in crowds, in the illusion of untouchability. But a shield can't hide what it protects forever. Strip it away, and all that's left is the man beneath it, and the question the world will be asking. She lets the pause stretch until it feels like the air itself is holding its breath. Then she delivers the final line, sharp as a blade. When you strip away the shield, what's left of the man? The chamber doesn't move, Trump doesn't blink. And somewhere beyond the walls, the chants of justice now rise again, like a tide that knows it's coming in, whether he's ready or not. Trump exhales through his nose, slow and deliberate, before leaning back in his chair. The movement is calculated, a performance of nonchalance, but the smirk that curls onto his face carries the glint of a man who thinks he's found his footing again. He adjusts his cufflink, waits for the murmurs in the gallery to settle, then leans toward the microphone with a voice dipped in mock amusement. You know, Congresswoman, this is quite the show you're putting on, he says, drawing out each word like he's savoring them. It's almost impressive, if I didn't know it's just an audition for the evening news. A ripple moves through the room, some in the gallery clap, A few even cheer, their voices breaking the tension like cracks in glass. Trump tilts his head toward the sound, giving the smallest of nods as if acknowledging a loyal chorus. "You're not here for the truth," he continues, his tone sharpening. "You're here for the cameras, for the viral clip. For that little moment you hope will get replayed 1,000 times on cable news so you can go home and tell your friends you stood up to Donald Trump." He shifts in his chair, spreading his hands wide in a gesture meant to claim the space. "And here's the thing. I've seen it before. Prosecutors, politicians, activists, all thinking they're going to make their name going after me. They all wanted the same thing you want, headlines, and do you know where they are now? Forgotten." The last word lands with a smug finality, the smirk deepening as he scans the room like a general reclaiming lost ground. In the press section, pens scratch furiously, capturing the shift in tone. A few of Trump's allies exchange quick, satisfied glances, sensing the tide might be turning. Mark Bennett's lips curl into something between a grin and a dare. Jasmine sits perfectly still, her eyes locked on him, the steady stillness of someone who understands that storms can be weathered without moving an inch. Trump leans forward again, lowering his voice just enough to make the room lean in. "You can wave your papers, you can read your memos, you can say whatever sounds dramatic, but at the end of the day, you're not uncovering anything new, you're acting. And like any good performance, this one will fade when the lights go out." The applause that follows is louder this time, pockets of the gallery feeding off his words. But as the sound swells, the camera catches something else, a flicker in Jasmine's eyes. Not panic, not retreat, something closer to calculation, like a chess player already to moves ahead. And it's in that flicker that the real question takes root, one that the applause can't drown out. If Trump believes he's turned the tide, has he just stepped into the very trap she's been waiting for him to walk into? For the first time since the hearing began, something shifts in Jasmine's expression, a shadow, barely perceptible, passing across her features. It's not defeat, but the flicker of a thought she can't quite push aside. The applause for Trump still lingers in the air, and for a split second she wonders if the noise will drown her out. Her fingers rest lightly on the folder before her, but the pressure in her chest isn't from the weight of the paper. It's the memory of every room where she's had to fight twice as hard to be heard, every door she had to force open just to stand on the same floor as those who took their presence for granted. The sound of the hearing fades, replaced in her mind by the hum of fluorescent lights from a courthouse years ago. She sees herself standing before a panel of mostly white officials, presenting a case they had already decided not to care about. She remembers their polite smiles, the way their eyes glazed over when she spoke of injustice that didn't touch them. She remembers walking out into the rain afterward, the water cold against her skin, feeling like she'd been fighting a tide with her bare hands. Her gaze drifts for a moment, scanning the chamber, catching the small smirks on the faces of a few Trump allies, the quick glances between reporters as they gauge the energy of the room. The faint scent of coffee drifts from somewhere in the gallery, oddly grounding amid the adrenaline. She inhales slowly, the air thick with the mix of power and expectation. She's been here before. Not this exact battlefield, but this exact feeling. That razor's edge between being hurt and being erased. The camera pulls back from her face, panning to Ayanna Pressley. Ayanna's posture is steady, her hands clasped in front of her, her eyes fixed on Jasmine with quiet intensity. She gives the smallest of nods, not performative, not for the cameras, but a signal Jasmine has seen before. It's the kind of nod that says, "I know this fight. You're not alone in it." The sound of the room rushes back in. The shuffle of papers, the faint hum of the AC, the quiet cough from someone in the back row. Jasmine straightens, the flicker of doubt retreating as quickly as it came. Her fingers press more firmly against the folder, grounding herself in the evidence, in the truth she knows she carries. She glances once at Ayanna, just long enough for the silent exchange to seal like a pact, then turns her eyes back to Trump. The smirk is still on his face, but it looks thinner now, stretched over something brittle. And in that instant, the doubt is gone, replaced by the certainty that the next move belongs to her, and it will land exactly where it needs to. The question now isn't whether she can regain the room. It's whether he understands that she already has. Jasmine inhales once, slow and steady, as if drawing the air itself into alignment. When she speaks, her voice is calm but carries a current beneath it, the kind that pulls you in before you realize you're caught. "Mr. Trump," She begins, "This isn't theater. This isn't about headlines or airtime. This is about the oath we swore, to defend the Constitution, to serve the people, to uphold justice not just when it's convenient, but especially when it's hard." The gallery stills, sensing the shift in her tone. Even the reporters lean forward, pens hovering over their notepads. Her words sharpen, each one like a hammer strike on stone. That Constitution doesn't belong to the wealthy or the powerful. It belongs to every citizen, to the woman who's been ignored, to the child who's been silenced, to communities who've been told their lives matter less. And when leaders fail to protect them, it isn't just a lapse in policy. It's a breach of the very contract this nation is built on. The overhead lights seem brighter now, reflecting off the polished wood of the desk, catching the gold edge of the DOJ memos still laid out before her like silent witnesses. Trump shifts, the smirk replaced by something more guarded. His hands pressed together, fingertips tapping once before stilling. Jasmine doesn't let the silence grow. "You talk about law and order, but law without justice is oppression. Order without fairness is control, and power without accountability." She pauses, her gaze locking on his like a spotlight. That's how predators walk free while survivors are left to pick up the pieces alone. A murmur runs through the gallery, heavier this time, tinged with both anger and recognition. Ayanna Presley's expression hasn't changed, but her eyes gleam with something electric, the look of someone watching a blow land exactly where it was aimed. Mark Bennett scribbles something on a pad, passing it to another aide, but his jaw tightens as he watches the room tilt. Jasmine presses forward, her voice low but resonant, pulling the audience toward her. "I have a moral obligation, not as a Democrat, not as a congresswoman, but as an American, to ensure this country doesn't look away when it's uncomfortable. And I will not sit here and pretend that the rights of the marginalized, the vulnerable, the voiceless are negotiable. Not today. Not under my watch." For a heartbeat, the chamber feels smaller, the distance between her and Trump collapsing under the weight of her words. The air hums with the tension of a line drawn in the sand. And as the camera closes in on her face, unflinching and unyielding, the question lingers in every mind. Sharp, dangerous, and unavoidable. Can truth still win in a room built on power? Jasmine doesn't announce what she's about to do. She simply reaches for the thick manila envelope at her side, its edges worn, its weight undeniable. The gallery tilts forward in their seats. She slides out a stack of pages stamped with the unmistakable DOJ seal. Without ceremony, she lays the first sheet flat on the table and angles it toward the nearest camera. Black bars are absent. These aren't the sanitized, redacted pages the public has seen. These are raw. Names, dates, conversations, transactions, every word exposed to the glare of the national broadcast. The area in the chamber changes instantly, a static charge running from wall to wall. Reporters surge forward, lenses clicking in frantic succession. Trump's head snaps toward the documents, his smirk evaporating like steam. "These," Jasmine says, her voice carrying a clarity that feels like a blade unsheathed, "are unredacted portions of the DOJ report on Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, portions withheld from the public under the justification of protecting the integrity of the investigation. An investigation, I might add, that your administration systematically dismantled." She flips to the next page, the paper's edge slicing the air. Here. August 1st, the date of Maxwell's transfer. Here. The internal communication from the Bureau of Prisons citing external executive influence. And here, the handwritten note from a senior official stating, and I quote, "Ensure this is handled per presidential preference." The words hang there like a dropped match in a room full of gasoline. Across from her, Trump shifts in his chair, his posture tight. His legal team leans in on either side, one whispering rapidly into his ear, another scribbling something on a legal pad. The microphones catch the faint scrape of his chair legs as he angles slightly away from the camera, his lips pressed together in a thin line, but his eyes flicker, once to the documents, once to Bennett, once back to Jasmine. She turns another page, her tone unwavering. "This is not interpretation. This is not speculation. This is your administration's paper trail, and it leads straight to the decisions that shielded Maxwell from harsher conditions, decisions that stalled subpoenas, decisions that left survivors waiting for justice that never came." The silence that follows is not the absence of sound but the presence of pressure. You can hear the faint shuffle of the gallery, the distant whir of a ceiling fan, the low hiss of the air vents. Outside, the chants of "Justice Now" seep faintly into the room, a ghostly chorus pressing against the walls. Trump leans back just enough to signal defiance, but his fingers tap once, twice, 3 times against the table before going still. The cameras catch it, and the image will be replayed endlessly. The man who didn't flinch for decades, caught tapping out a rhythm that sounds suspiciously like doubt. Jasmine's hand rests atop the final page, her eyes never leaving his. "Mr. Trump," she says, her voice low but resonant, "this is every card on the table. And the only question left is whether you'll face them, or fold in front of the whole country." The shift begins subtly, a lean here, a glance there, but within seconds, the energy in the gallery transforms. People edge forward in their seats, the kind of movement you see when a predator circles his prey and the crowd knows a strike is coming. The murmurs are different now, no longer defensive or dismissive. They carry weight, a low current of agreement, of recognition. Even those who came in wearing red hats sit quieter, their eyes narrowing as they study the unredacted words glowing under the harsh chamber lights. The sensory details hit all at once. The smell of sweat, faint but unmistakable, drifts from the tightly packed rows where every seat is filled. The sharp, metallic tang of the microphones mixes with the scent of old wood and coffee gone cold. The relentless click-click-click of camera shutters forms a jagged rhythm, like a typewriter hammering out the first draft of history. Flashes erupt in bursts, momentarily bleaching faces white before dropping them back into the shadowy tension of the room. Trump sits still, but stillness has never looked less like control. His legal team huddles closer, lips moving fast, pens scribbling on yellow pads. One aide slides a folded note toward him, but he doesn't pick it up. He keeps his eyes on Jasmine, and for the first time, it looks less like a challenge and more like a calculation. She knows it, the gallery knows it, the cameras know it. Jasmine turns one of the unredacted pages toward the audience, letting them see for themselves the neat black ink, the damning clarity. The text is simple, but explosive, a direct reference to minimizing legal exposure for key figures. With a date and a signature, the cameras will freeze frame and blast across every news network within the hour. A ripple moves through the crowd. Sharper this time, it's not just outrage, it's belief. In the press row, reporters exchange quick glances, fingers flying over keyboards. One of them mouths silently to another, "He's losing them." Ayanna Pressley shifts slightly in her seat, her expression unreadable, but her eyes locked on Jasmine, a silent reinforcement. Mark Bennett notices the tilt, the slow, almost imperceptible change in the room's balance, and it makes his jaw tighten. The murmurs swell again, not just in volume but in tone. This is no longer the divided noise from the start of the hearing. This is a tide moving in one direction, pulling with it even those who thought they'd resist. The atmosphere thickens, the heat of too many bodies in one space mingling with the tension of seeing a figure like Trump caught in a narrowing corner. Jasmine sets the page down without a word, her silence a calculated strike. The air seems to hold still, waiting for him to fill it. And as he reaches for the microphone, the weight of the crowd's shift is unmistakable. The question is no longer if they've turned against him, but how far they're willing to go now that they've tasted blood in the water. Jasmine waits until the last camera flash fades, until the murmurs in the gallery quiet into a fragile, expectant silence. Then she leans into the microphone, her voice steady, deliberate, and dangerous. "You wanted to bury the truth," she says, letting each word breathe, the pause between them tightening the room like a fist. Her eyes don't leave his. "But Mr. Trump, the truth can dig." The final word lands like a steel hammer on stone, reverberating in the air, impossible to ignore. The reaction is instant. A rustle sweeps through the chamber, then swells into applause, first from one row of lawmakers, then from another. Within seconds, it becomes a standing ovation from a swath of the chamber. The sound is sharp and deliberate, not the scattered politeness of politics, but the kind of clapping that says we've just witnessed a blow that can't be undone. The echo of hands striking hands bounces off the marble walls, filling every corner. Trump does not stand. He doesn't even pretend to clap. He stays seated, his hands resting stiffly on the table, eyes narrowed into slits. The defiance on his face looks practiced, but the set of his jaw betrays the pressure building beneath. His legal team exchanges low, tense whispers, their pens moving furiously, as though they can still control the narrative if they write fast enough. Mark Bennett stares at Jasmine with a mix of resentment and grudging respect, the look of a strategist who knows the optics have just shifted in ways no spin can fully repair. The sensory world around them is electric. The smell of cologne and sweat mingles with the faint tang of hot wiring from overworked TV lights. Cameras pop in rapid fire, their shutters punctuating the applause with mechanical precision. Somewhere in the gallery, a woman exhales sharply, the kind of release that comes after holding tension too long. Jasmine doesn't break her gaze from Trump. She doesn't need to raise her voice over the ovation. Her silence says more than shouting could. Her hands remain on the table, palms flat, as if staking her claim to the ground between them. The light catches the edge of the unredacted pages beside her, their ink lines standing in stark contrast to the sterile white paper, proof and accusation bound together. When the applause finally ebbs, the room doesn't slip back into neutrality. The energy remains charged, brittle, as though one more strike could shatter the entire scene into chaos. Trump leans toward his mic as if to speak, but stops, the pause hanging heavy, like a man who knows the next words out of his mouth will follow him forever. The gavel hasn't fallen yet, but its echo is already in the air, a phantom sound everyone can feel pressing against their ribs. And in that breathless moment, one question cuts through the nose, sharp as the edge of a verdict. What happens after the gavel falls? The gavel's final strike still echoes in her ears as Jasmine rises from her seat. She doesn't glance back at Trump. There's nothing left to say in that room. The gallery stirs, some clapping quietly, others simply watching in a silence heavy with the knowledge they've just witnessed something they'll remember for years. Her heels click against the marble floor, the sound sharp and measured, each step carrying the weight of every word she delivers. As she pushes through the chamber doors, the atmosphere changes instantly. The air outside is cooler, laced with the scent of fresh rain that's just swept over the city. The dark stone steps of Capitol Hill gleam under the cloudy afternoon light. Survivors are waiting, some holding photographs, some clutching folded papers, all wearing the expression of people who have fought too long to be invisible. One woman reaches out, her hand trembling, and Jasmine takes it without hesitation. Another wraps her in a quick, fierce embrace, whispering something only Jasmine hears. Then the swarm descends. Reporters push forward, microphones bristling, cameras snapping so fast the strobe of flashbulbs turns the rain-slick steps into a storm of light. The smell of wet pavement mingles with the faint perfume of a supporter's scarf as questions are hurled from every direction. Congresswoman, do you think he's finished? Will this lead to charges? Do you fear retaliation? Jasmine answers none of them yet. Her focus is on the faces in front of her, the ones who don't have networks or press passes, only their truth. The crowd parts briefly as Ayanna Pressley emerges beside her, a steadying presence. For a moment, the two women exchange no words, just a look that carries everything. The battle fought inside, the ones still raging outside, and the ones that will come next. The chants from protesters still linger across the street, carried on the damp breeze. Justice now, justice now. Jasmine steps down into the open air, the rain starting again in light, cool drops that speckle her hair and darken the shoulders of her jacket. The flashes follow her down the steps, but she moves as if they're nothing more than lightning in a distant storm. The survivors trail behind, some smiling through tears, others silent, but all of them moving with her, a procession of people who have waited too long for this moment. And as she reaches the bottom step, the roar of the crowd swells, not just for what she said inside, but for the fact that she walked out without bowing her head. The cameras close in, desperate to capture the expression on her face. It's not victory, not yet, but it is defiance, clear and unshakable. And in that frame, under the gray Washington sky, one thought cuts through the nose like a blade. If this was the walkout, what will the return look like? By the time Jasmine's motorcade leaves Capitol Hill, the digital wildfire has already consumed the country. Twitter's trending bar is a battlefield of hashtags, hashtag Crockett vs Trump burning at #1, followed closely by hashtag Justice for Survivors and hashtag Dealer of Depravity. Millions of retweets carry the clip of her final blow, "Your depravity wrapped in a suit," cut into slow motion, captions blazing across the screen. TikTok edits pair the moment with pounding bass drops, while Instagram Reels frame it with black and white filters and the word truth flashing in bold red letters. The reactions are instant and polarized. Supporters flood comment sections with fire emojis and phrases like "finally, someone with backbone," "this is history," and "she just made Congress worth watching." On the other side, Trump loyalists rally under hashtags of their own, calling her a grandstander, media pawn, and worse. But even in their defenses, there's a note of unease, a hint that this time the blow might stick. The sheer volume of engagement makes every news outlet scramble. CNN runs wall-to-wall coverage, Fox edits the clip but can't avoid showing the key moment, MSNBC replays it with analysts breaking down her tone, timing, and strategy. By nightfall, late-night comedy shows open with the depravity line. Some played for laughs, looping Trump's still frame after the words land. Others deliver monologues about accountability and the rare spectacle of a politician refusing to flinch. One host looks directly into the camera and says, "That's not a soundbite, folks, that's a verdict." Memes spread just as fast. Split-screen images, Trump's reaction paired with captions like "when the roast is fatal and silence speaks louder." In living rooms across America, the clip runs on repeat. Over dinner, in bars, on subway screens. For survivors watching from home, it's more than a viral moment. It's a line in the sand, proof that their stories can breach even the highest walls of power. For Trump's inner circle, it's a warning shot that has already reached millions. And as midnight rolls in, with the hashtag still climbing and the video passing 50 million views, the question is no longer whether America has reacted. It's whether the shockwave will fade or keep building until it hits something that finally breaks. The screen darkens slightly, and Jasmine's voice cuts through. Low, deliberate, each syllable weighted with everything that's come before. Justice isn't a place you arrive, it's the road you walk, step by step, no matter how heavy the rain. Her words play over images of her leaving the Capitol steps, rain streaking down her jacket, survivors and supporters walking beside her. The camera lingers on the details, a hand gripping another in solidarity, raindrops pooling on a protest sign, a tear rolling down a cheek before disappearing into the corner of a smile. Her voice continues, steady but edged with steel. It's not enough to watch, it's not enough to hope. If you want a country worth believing in, you demand the truth, you fight for those pushed to the margins, and you never, ever let silence stand in for justice. The montage builds, survivors embracing, lawmakers watching replay footage, protesters raising their signs higher as the rain falls harder. Flashes from cameras ignite the darkness, like lightning, freezing these moments into frames that will live far beyond today. There's no swelling music, no sugarcoating. Only the sound of her voice against the faint background of rain and the crowd's muffled chant. Justice now. Every system will try to protect itself. Every powerful hand will try to hold the door closed. But doors can break, walls can fall. And the truth, no matter how deep you bury it, can dig its way out. The visuals slow, settling on close-ups of survivors' faces, lines of grief, strength, and defiance all sharing the same space. Each look into the camera feels like an unspoken question. Will you stand with us? The footage fades to black, but her voice stays one beat longer. This fight doesn't end when the cameras turn away. It ends when silence is no longer safer than the truth. The black screen remains, and white letters fade in, stark and unblinking. The fight continues. There's no fade-out music, just the quiet, lingering weight of her words, leaving the viewer with the sense that this wasn't just a hearing. It was a warning, a call, and a promise all at once. And as the screen finally cuts to darkness, the question remains, sharp and impossible to ignore. What will you do with it? In the end, Jasmine's battle in that chamber wasn't just about politics, it was about the courage to confront power when silence would be easier. The lesson is simple but unshakable. Justice lives or dies in the choices we make to speak up, even when the room tilts against us. It's about standing for the vulnerable, demanding truth, and refusing to let comfort outweigh conscience. You don't need a seat in Congress to fight for what's right, you need the will to act. So when your moment comes, will you stay silent or will you stand and speak? Thank you for watching until this moment and for standing with us on this journey for justice. Your support means everything. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what's next. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let us know what moved you most in this story. Together, our voices make a difference.